The human experience is nothing more than a series of problematics without a solution. We feel the problem of suffering, of loneliness, depression, and boredom. And then we say, okay, we have to find the so-called solution. But once we allow romantic or even platonic human interaction into our life, what ends up happening is we realize that the so-called solution for the problem was just the reintroduction of a new problem in the stead of the old one, which is even worse than before. The equation of human life is this: problem equals problem equals problem equals problem. And every time we deal with these individual problems, we try to find a solution, but the solution just is the reemergence of a brand new problem. See, what I've learned to do, and this is my definition of spiritual maturity, is I've actually learned to embrace the anhedonia and say, boredom, loneliness, depression, you are my friend. You are my lover. You are my peace of mind. You are my preferred state. And whenever the idea of a will to find a solution arises, I say, let's have retrospect. In hindsight, what happened when you've had your dozen or more romantic partners? What happened? It ended in betrayal and heartbreak, especially on your part, didn't it? And your so-called friends, stab in the back that ended in gossip and all sorts of drama. I feel a sort of hubris when I tell you that although I'm 27 years old, I think I've had enough life experience as far as human interaction is concerned to be confident that it is better for me to just embrace the anhedonic loneliness / boredom / depression as my form of happiness. I embrace it, I accept it, and whenever there's that intrusive thought that arises that says, go out there and try to find something meaningful, try to find something worthwhile, I understand that that's a solutionist paradigm, which I have hitherto fell for as the trap that it is. Now, I say, anytime an idea arises in my mind that tries to give a solution to my current state, I consider it to be something that must be rejected as an intrusive thought. See, people often ask me, why are you a nihilist? Well, it's because that the meaning that exists is meaninglessness itself for its very purpose. And the purpose is purposelessness itself for the very purpose. How do I know this? Because I am a subject in a world of millions upon millions of objects, and every one of those objects have a definition within an English dictionary. So I can say, okay, what's the meaning of a mosquito? Let's look it up in the dictionary, shall we? Here's the true meaning. A vampiric, parasitical organism that lives for the sole purpose of sucking blood. And then I say, okay, I understand that that's the meaning by definition, that that's the purpose by definition, but I say, the meaning behind that meaning is quite meaningless, and the purpose behind that purpose is purposelessness. Done on purpose. and that's nihilism. And I ascribe the same thing to all of the definitions of human life. What is the definition of romantic expenditure and sexual expenditure? Well, by definition, statistically provable, it is most likely going to end in a breakup or a divorce. That's why everybody, and I mean everybody, has a body count on their hands. Maybe not everybody. Maybe if you were lucky enough to marry your high school sweetheart and you guys have lived happily ever after thereafter, maybe you're an exception. But by and large, statistically, even if somebody is in their early 20s, you ask them, how many exes do you have? And if they're honest, oftentimes it will be in the dozens. Body count on most people, even at a really young age, is exponential. So, when we look at the meaning of, say, going to work, what is that? Well, the meaning is you got to go to work to make money so you can give it all away, to have a bed to sleep in and a toilet to take a shit in, etc. And it's like, okay, I understand that that's the meaning, that's the purpose. But you see where I'm going? Truth is oxymoronic in nature because you understand that the meaning behind everything is the correct meaning by definition, but you say that it's meaningless. Absolutely. So that's why I'm a nihilist and I make no bones about it. I have learned to find my sense of peace and well-being within silence, within being alone. And it's not a cry for help on my part when I speak these things out loud. It's a self-affirmation, or rather a reminder to myself as I broadcast this to the world, that if you really wanted to, you could get a girlfriend. It's not that hard to do, especially because of dating apps, etc. But I think of the history of what that's done to my psyche, to my heart, to my soul. And I never had superficial intentions. I was never one of these hookup culture, one-night stand kind of people. I tried to make something of it, but whenever I try to make something of it, it just makes death out of me. Whenever I try to make something of anything that's outside of the realm of the anhedonia that I'm all too familiar with its loneliness, depression, and boredom, I am left feeling dead. At least when I feel this way as my default setting, it feels good to be alive. Isn't that irony? For somebody to be clinically depressed and they say, this is the closest thing to happiness, so I'm just going to accept it as my sort of happiness, rather than going out to try to find a quote solution and be devastated. And I mean devastated. I don't like anything that this world has to offer. Whenever I feel any problem that arises, be it hunger, I don't say the solution is to eat food. I say, okay, I'm experiencing the problem of hunger, so I'm going to eat this piece of pizza, which is also the reintroduction of a brand new problem. Same thing with all bodily phenomena. The experience of that suffering is a problem, and the fact that you're forced against your will to salvage it is a problem. So the best I can do for my state of well-being is to just accept that depression is the new happiness. And with a satirical spirit, I fucking celebrate it. And I say, it's not so bad. The flesh and its four corners. That's the best this world has to offer. And when those intrusive thoughts arise that tell me to extrovert myself, I deny it 100% of the time. The temptation is always there, but it's only an inclination as of now. It is not something that I intend to follow through with. I'm currently unemployed, and I experience great poverty. This is a problem. But if I was to get a new job, regardless of how much money I got paid, because it would take me away from my depression, boredom, and loneliness, it would be a problem that is so problematic that I would define it as devastating. But eventually, I'm going to have to face that devastation because I can't remain unemployed for too much longer. So that is something that I dread in the future. But for now, my state of complete non-involvement with this place, and I mean complete non-involvement. When I tell you I live under a rock, I truly mean that. I have no idea what's going on in the world right now. I really don't. I don't watch the news. I don't even watch truth or content that covers current events anymore. It sounds insensitive, but I'm going to say it. I just don't fucking care what happens to other people anymore. I just don't. Because as soon as I get emotionally invested, I just find that all too familiar devastation once more. But when I silence stimuli, and when I remain in my hermitage of quietude and solitude, that is my preferred state. I just don't fucking care about anything that goes on in the outside world anymore. I just don't. And I have no motivation whatsoever to find friends or lovers. I like being alone. And that is the only thing I like, is to be alone. Because there's no devastation involved. There's just boredom, loneliness, and anhedonia. Which is my kind of happiness. My kind of happiness. Do me a favor. Shit in one hand and hope in the other and see which one fills up faster. Because when I say I just don't care anymore about other people, it's because I simply cannot afford to, because I've done too much of that already as it is. And I find it to be entirely inconsequential, because my emotional outpouring of disagreement is not going to change the historical determinism to reach its ultimate conclusion, which is evil fucking winning. See, there's this content creator who I find disagreement with, and his name is Derek, and he has a channel called The Green Wizard. And I don't dislike him as a person. Truly, I don't. But I think he's misguided when he asserts that, quote, people who say evil always wins don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Because justice will be done, so on and so forth. And I say that I'm diametrically opposed to that viewpoint. Of course, I wish it to be true, but I know that it is not. All of the protesters of the Vietnam War, did it stop all of those 18-year-olds to be forced against their will, fight in a war where they ultimately lost their lives? No. History reached its conclusion where evil won. When it came to the way they shut the world down over the fear of some big bad bug, and then they introduced a certain blood poison into the bloodstream of the public, evil won, as history reached its deterministic conclusion where evil won, didn't it? Because people got the shot. Oh yes, they did. And they got another one. And then they got another one, and then they gave it to their kids. The majority of the world got it. Looks like evil won to me. I mean, hell, we live in a world where the apex predator of our species has full monopolization over all institutions, be it media, be it finance, be it everything. And this apex predator of our species, they belong to a certain ethnic group that belongs to a certain extreme religious ideation. Starts with the letter J. They control every fucking thing. They're able to treat this world like a cheap whore that they can just treat as they please at the expense of everybody else. So what I say, I just don't fucking care anymore about other people. It's because as soon as I start to care, I suffer profoundly. I find that compassion is more or less a vice. Because when you just ooze compassion all over the place, as I've done in many of my other videos, and I will probably do still to come, because I can't help but to show that vice called compassion that I try to repress as best as possible. But as soon as I outpour compassion, you know what happens? I suffer the worst kind of suffering. And that is a type of suffering that suffers because of the other people who are suffering. And even though it's not my direct suffering, I suffer secondhand. And because of the historical principle of determination, these people who are undergoing what they're undergoing, it could not happen otherwise, because evil always wins in this fucking world. And I don't want to sit on the sideline crying big old crocodile tears anymore for the victimized, because it's just a waste of my energy, because I am outpouring all of that compassion towards something that was ultimately put upon the face of this earth to be victimized by the historical principle. And me, as a spectator of the historical principle, because there's not a fucking thing that I can do to stop it, I just assume not even look at it anymore. Because you know something? I've seen enough. I know what's going on. I'm very familiarized with the state of this world and who's controlling it and for what reason. And I see that They can do whatever the fuck they want. They can kidnap hundreds of thousands of children and sodomize them. And then I say, how can you not have compassion? But then again, although, quote, how can you not have compassion? Your compassion is being outpoured towards something that is happening away from you. You know not where, and you know not how to stop it. And even if you tried, you find that you can't. And then decades upon decades of this shedding a tear because of the tears that are being shed by other people, you find that enough is enough. My least favorite thing about this world is the fact that there is so much evil. And even though I protest it, I find that it doesn't stop the evil at all. The evil continues to do what it does. I'm largely exempt from it. But I know that there's so many other people who are not exempt from it. It's happening to them right now as we speak, the most unspeakable tortures. And I find that I feel like less of a man because I have all of this anger and all of this hatred for what happens to other people. But there's nothing I can do to stop it. And all I can do is just put my face into my pillow and scream at the top of my lungs. We have no more than a few thousand international psychopaths who are all in cahoots controlling this world, doing the things that they do. But yet, there's billions of humans, and they all say, I despise this evil. But yet, the heart of evil inside of the vessels of these subhuman deplorables, it continues to beat, and their lungs continue to breathe, and they continue to press buttons and drop bombs and rape and fucking pillage as they please. So when I say I just don't care anymore, it's not my natural state. My natural state is to care, but I force myself not to. When I say I just don't care about other people anymore, I force myself. I just don't care. Because there's nothing I can do. In fact, had I never been born, and there's no such thing as Garrett, and there's no such thing as anything to do with my spirit, I'm just in a state of complete and utter non-existence, this world would still exist, and all of the things that I'm complaining about right now would be happening regardless. Whether you say, I just don't care about other people anymore, or whether you say, I care all too much about other people, you know something? It doesn't really fucking matter. It really doesn't. You know something? I rewatched the video up until this point, and I must confess, I am totally full of shit. I care about other people. I just pretend that I don't, as a coping mechanism. I say, fuck it, chuck it, put it in a bucket. And I take the bucket and I put it outside in the dumpster. And I walk away from it to try to find relief from a compassion that is so worthless that it can't do anything to help those to whom I am compassionate towards. So I say, I don't care to care. It is my will to will, not to fucking emotionally invest myself in things that I can do nothing. Have you ever tried to stand up against evil and you found that you were punished? Where the initiator of provocation, say it's a toxic bully of a boss who abuses you. It's not against the law for him to be an asshole to you. Call 911. Say, yeah, I'd like to report a crime. My boss is a fucking prick, and he verbally abuses me. Uh-huh. Beep. That's it. But if you say, you know what? I'm gonna stand up for myself. I've had enough of your shit. Fuck you. Guess what? You're fired. And then he calls the cops and says, remove this employee who I just fired from the premises because he's trespassing. And then they arrest you. If you sock him in the face because he said something that crossed the line, you go to jail for battery. See how that works? I remember when I went to school, I had a real bitch of a fucking English teacher. And one day, I had enough of her verbal lacerations towards me. And I called her a cunt. I got suspended. And I was talking to the principal, and I told him how she treated me up until my breaking point. And he basically said that they can talk to the students however they want. And you're like, how can that be? It's always like that in this world. Whenever you deal with something that is too horrible to bear, but you have to bear it, and you try to reach out for help, maybe you pray to God, maybe you talk to your therapist, but you just have to deal with that shit every day. And the one day you reach your breaking point, you're punished. You're the fuck up. I've been fired for that reason. I've been kicked out of certain homes for that reason, because I couldn't deal with the people that I was living with, because they would do bullshit like they would blast music at 7 o'clock in the morning. And they weren't the foreman either. They were just roommates. And I would just pitch a fit. But the next thing you know, I'm the one that's being evicted. It's always been like that. When you deal with toxicity, society just expects you to grin and bear it. But if you try to do something about it, you get punished. Even lest you take matters into your own hands and you get physically aggressive, you'll get jailed for it. So, this is why I force myself not to care, even though deep down inside, it's a coping mechanism and I really do care. My least favorite thing about this reality is the fact that evil can treat people however they want, and it's lawful for them to do so. But if you stand up for yourself, you're the one that's punished. I only have such a disturbed mind because the world itself is a disturbance. So, when I speak on the disturbing, it is only because I am disturbed, because the world is disturbed. The people who are not disturbing because they are disturbed by a world that is disturbed, they don't know the truth. You can't be happy knowing the truth. People who claim that they found the truth, and that's why they're happy. That's the false truth. The real truth will leave you disturbed. You become disturbed. But you call it sanity. Because believe it or not, this is true sanity right here. This is true sanity right there. For people who can't resonate with it, you're in the right place. You'll get there. See, compassion in this reality is very misdirected. And misdirected compassion has a specific purpose, and it is to tunnel compassion towards a dummy. So you waste your compassion on something that only exists as a theoretical nonsense. Let me give you an example. These environmental nut jobs that keep screaming, "The world is on fire. The world is on fire. Greenhouse emissions are the problem." Well, you know something? They just regurgitate what's being parroted on popular consensus outlets. There is no evidence to support a world that is heating up. It would be self-evident, and you would feel the temperature rising. For example, I live in the Mojave Desert, and the temperature has always been the same. The highest it will be is about 107 degrees Fahrenheit. It's always been that way. You can go to meteorological records, and you could say, what was the temperature in my location in the Mojave Desert in December 25th, 1973? Okay. And then you continue to measure it up until the modern day, and it's not increased. But every time there's a natural fire, they blame it on you know what. And it's impossible because you could go on meteorological temperature records for that specific location and say it's like 95 degrees Fahrenheit. It's always been 95 degrees Fahrenheit at the hottest. And then when there was a fire in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, it was just a fire. But now, when a fire happens in the same location under the same temperature, they blame it on you know what. And then people start to have compassion for the earth. They say, we have to help the environment. We have to help the environment. What is wrong with you? Their compassion is being misdirected. Now, something like polluting our oceans and plastic infesting all four corners of this earth, even though it's completely unnecessary, they just don't use brown paper bags because it's more expensive. Plastic is cheaper. See, that's an actual environmental issue that affects wildlife, etc., right? Kills the oceans, you know. But when it comes to this idea that the world is on fire, there is a lot of gain for the powers that be for you to believe that. It's misdirected compassion. There is no such thing. It's a hoax. You know something? That's the thing about compassion. It's always the leftist who wants to fight for the rights of a perceived underdog. And they say, you gotta be anti-racist. But anti-racism is just another form of racism. Mainly attacks people who look like me, and they want them to feel guilty just for existing. All of the problems of this, that, or the other. You try to put a so-called solution. The solution is even a bigger problem. You say, capitalism is a problem, but then they introduce socialism, and now you have an even bigger problem on your hands. They say, oh, the environment is the problem. We need to stop greenhouse emissions, blah, blah, blah. And then you start getting carbon taxed, and the government starts telling you what you can and can't drive, and they start encroaching on you, and now you got an even bigger problem than the perceived problem, which really wasn't a problem in the first place. But the so-called solution for the problem. It's a fucking problem. We got this big bad bug. Ooh, we got a problem on our hands. We got a problem on our hands. It's okay. It's okay. I have the solution. Just take some of this. And all the while, watch our financial system collapse and watch inflation go up, 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 up. That's the problem. The problem was never the world is on fire. The problem was never a big bad bug. The problem was never, oh, that big bad white man. Oh, he's a devil. We have to be anti-racist because blah, 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 blah. No. But the solution to these supposed problems, that's the problem, you see. The problem is the solution itself. Because this world is filled with problems and there is no solution. What about that guy who was protesting what's going on in that particular country that's right next to, the country that has the Star of David on it, what they're doing to them? As protest, he went up to a government building and he poured gasoline on himself and he actually lit himself on fire. And he said, "Free Pala! Free Pala!" That's what compassion does to people. It makes you light yourself on fire. It makes you block traffic on the road. Because we have to stop oil. We have to stop greenhouse emissions. So I'm just going to stand in front of the road and block traffic like a fucking retard, light myself on fire. All stupidity has compassion as a prerequisite. Misdirected, that is. And not only that, but all solutions to geopolitical problems is just the reintroduction of an even bigger problem. Just like with mundane, trivial life. So what do? You don't wake up and smell the coffee, you wake up and smell the bullshit. And you say, not today. Not today. I want you to understand something. There is a conspiratorial principle that controls this reality. Whenever something is being promoted radically with aggression, and it's always a one-sided conversation with no time for dissenting voices or anything contrary, you know you're being lied to. You know you're being lied to. So don't be lied to anymore. How can you go the rest of your life without ever being lied to again? It's very simple. Understand that there is no truth to be found because everything is a lie. But ironically, that is the truth. The truth is everything is a lie. And once you recognize everything is a lie, you have the truth. But if you're looking for truth in this world, You don't have the truth. And you're going to be confronted with lies, and you're going to take them as a truth. And then you're going to have that misdirected compassion. And you're going to get possessed. And you're going to start acting like a belligerent, filthy retard, like everybody else. You know, feminism, as it is now, is really anti-woman. The so-called anti-racism of the woke. It's just another form of racism. Everything of something that claims to be a certain thing is really just against the very thing that it claims to be in favor of. I believe nothing, and that too is a belief. But I'm comfortable with it. The belief in non-belief. The idea against all ideas. It's like an inversion of Simon Says. When Simon says to suck a dick, I'll eat your pussy. When Simon says suck a dick, I will eat your pussy. I went to the astral plane the other day to meet my spiritual teacher. He calls himself the egregious guru, the last omen of the odious. And he wrote and read out loud to me the Book of Fools, and I paraphrase thus. The fool cannot escape the terrible, and the fool should never think that just because he does one thing that's less terrible than the other thing, that he's not still a fool. A fool performs the terrible of impregnating another fool with a fool inside the stomach. And then a fool performs the terrible of abortion. But even worse, the fool performs the terrible of bringing that fool into the world to have two fools as parents. Well, that's terrible. See, that's the thing. People virtue signal and they say they, quote, do the right thing. Talk about performing abortion as an anti-natalist as if it's some kind of virtue signal. As if it's some kind of moral high ground to treat a medical procedure as extreme as that as a form of birth control and think you're doing the right thing. But shouldn't the very word anti-natalist be according to its definition, where there is no natal activity to occur in the first place because you are a, quote, anti-natalist? So if there's activity going on natally, then you failed right off the bat. And then you say, what type of terrible am I going to perform as a fool? The first was to fuck, the second was to impregnate, and the third was to abort. But even worse than that, bring another fuckhead into the world, why don't you? But regardless of what you do, don't ever think that you're not a fool and did not perform the terrible. You did. It's all terrible. Just some things are more terrible than others. You see? Oh yeah, it's terrible to eat meat, you fool. Those poor innocent animals that were tortured in those slaughterhouses. Then you're gonna eat their flesh. Oh my god. But it's even more terrible than that is the fool who calls herself the vegan mother, who performs the even bigger terrible of feeding her child a bunch of synthetic Beyond Meat that was made in a fucking laboratory. Then he develops all kinds of health problems because of it. Oh, what a fool. You see, the point is, everything that we do in this reality is a terrible activity that is performed upon your foolishness. So you have a, quote, lesser of two evils. It's evil to kill an unborn child, but it's evil to bring a child into the world. It's evil to eat meat. Then again, it's evil not to eat meat. Because you give that shit to kids and they don't develop properly because they need the meat because we were designed to be evil. It's unescapable. The fool cannot escape the terrible. We're designed to fuck. Eventually a girl is gonna get knocked up. The fool can't escape the terrible. Regardless of what he does, the wise man knows that the foolishness of his terribleness is always present to one degree or another, and he knows it. He doesn't lie to himself. It tries to pretend to have some sort of a moral high ground. He understands the folly of unintelligent design that made him to be the fool that he is, to perform the terrible that he does almost involuntarily. But at the end of the day, we all have our names written in the book of fools, and I just try not to be a fool in so much as possible. And the terrible things that I do, I try to make it be the least terrible in compared to the other terribles. So everything is just a choice between what terribles a fool wants to perform. There is no solution. I've tried that shit. I said, it's terrible to eat meat. So I was a vegan for 3 years and I ended up developing all kinds of autoimmune issues, and then I was forced to eat meat again. And then I'm like, oh great. I gotta swap this terrible for that terrible again. Yeah. I knocked a girl up one time and I said, oh man, what a fool I am, how terrible. She said she was gonna keep it, but she had a miscarriage. It's actually happened to me a few times, believe it or not. And I said, wow, I know I performed a terrible as a fool, but the biggest terrible of them all, I was exempt from. I feel that we try to avoid doing the wrong thing, but it's an impossibility. We must do wrong things. Every fucking step we take upon the ground in which we trot is violence upon all of the little organisms that you're squishing and squashing like a Godzilla giant. Every step you take is a sort of violence. Everything that you do is just wrong, wrong, wrong. But you know what? I'm not going to feel guilty anymore. I'm just going to try to be the least terrible of a fool that I can. And the man who humbles himself to that degree, he is wise, ironically. Even though my mind is in a terrible place, throughout this video, I've only given you the best of me. Believe it or not, you caught me in a good mood. This is my happy place. You know something? Since we're on the topic of there is no solution for the problem, and any problem that you're going to introduce is just going to be a new problem, even worse than the old one. Here's the thing. This is also true for the hypothetical theorizations of the quote truthers who present an ought to replace the is factor. So for instance, that which is the demonstrable actuality that exists as objective fact. And they say, this is all wrong, this is all wrong, this is all wrong, we can do it right. So they put the way it is, no, this is how it ought to be. But what they don't realize is they've created a never ever land within a motion picture that only exists in their imagination. For example, the anarchist says, as opposed to the statist, that government is a terroristic, anti-human organization that acts as an autoimmune disease upon the public because it claims to be the white blood cells that protect and serve the organisms, but what it does is it attacks the organism. Just like an autoimmune disease. That's all government is. I understand that. And they say, how it is like this? It ought to be like this. And then they promote this idea of non-government where everybody is living in voluntary cooperation with one another, and they abide by the non-aggression principle, as they call it, and they are not under any type of governmental duress. Okay, for one, this is a theoretical hypothetical, and it's never going to happen because statistically, 95% of the population of the Western world is a statist. They do believe in government. They do believe in police, military, and taxation, all of those things. But let's just say the tables turned and the government was rectified by becoming obliterated. Okay, well, if that's the case, then what would happen if there was no government is, especially because of where human consciousness is at, it might seem all fine and dandy at first, but what would eventually happen is there would be a collective body that would come together as opposed to another collective body. And there would be various civil wars that would take place, mostly racially, I would imagine, all throughout the country. And the defeated would eventually surrender, and they would be subjugated to the new, quote, form of government, which would be like a sort of guerrilla warfare. Would happen all the time. And this idea that there is an is versus ought dichotomy, where the way things are, as it is, it ought to be this way. So they create a utopia of idealism, but were that to be embodied, which it never would be, it just wouldn't work the way that they think it would. It's the same with a lot of so-called truthers who promote the idea of nationalism, where they say, the fact that we're multicultural, this is the root of all issues. But if we were to have a government that would put a Christian theocracy into place, and they would take all of the people who don't look like us back to their respective homelands, this would be the solution. You really expect that there would be a fucking scenario? And there's people who full-heartedly believe this, and they advocate it, and they live, eat, drink, shit this stuff. But were that ever to become in place, you would have to expect a scenario where you would have to have enough people with your pigmentation by the millions and millions to look at the people who don't look like them and say, back to the country where your genetic entity derived from. You really think that's ever going to fucking happen? That's never going to happen, dude. Not that it should. I certainly don't advocate anything like that, even hypothetically. But there's tons of these people. It's like a breeding ground for these types of people, especially on platforms like BitChute, where they espouse these types of things. And it's not necessarily just the immorality of it. It's the fact that that's just never going to happen. A world of voluntary cooperation without government. Whereas at least it's going to be a lot better than what we have now. Yeah, give me a fucking break. You think the human mind that's a slave, that's used to being subordinated and used to being told what to do, and you're just to take away their enslavement and you're like, you're free, that people aren't just going to go fucking crazy and start killing each other right off the bat? You really don't think so? You really don't think that what we call a, quote, bad neighborhood is not just going to have a fucking free-for-all upon everybody? Yeah, that's really going to work. Yeah. Anarchy is the solution. There's another ought. Nationalism. There's another ought. These things these things are never gonna work. It's the same with veganism. I don't have anything against vegans, but here's the thing: the adage, quote, "the future is vegan." It's just not possible because most people who go vegan eventually go back to eating meat. This is statistically factual. Not even because they want to, but because they realized that their health was declining and they felt a lot better. So you guys are a vast minority. But even if hypothetically the world became 50% vegan and 50% meat eaters, billions and billions of animals are still going to be slaughtered to feed all of those billions of people. And it would never even be 50%. You guys are barely like 3% of the population. You see that? So that ought, the world should just ought to stop eating meat, and then the future is vegan. There's just never going to be enough people who have the compassion that you do to stop doing what it is that they do. So basically, the point is, everything that we despise, whether it be government, whether it be the fact that so many people eat meat and they exploit animals, it is that way. It's going to be that way forever and ever, as long as this place exists. And any idea that you have to promote the contrary is just a hypothetical theorization that exists in the world of ought, which is never ever land, and it's entirely idealistic, and therefore it exists in the human imagination as a coping mechanism to escape from reality, to create a hypothetical future scenario of the quote solution, which, were it to be implemented, would just be the introduction of another fucking problem. See? There's never going to be enough people to get on board with whatever it is that your minority belief system espouses. So, as opposed to this, I would say that I do consider myself an anarchist. But do I think it's ever going to be implemented? And if it was implemented, do I think it would work? The answer is no. But does the governmental system work? Certainly not. So it's just a catch-22 of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Damned if you eat meat, damned if you're a vegan. Damned if you believe in government, damned if you don't. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. That's why I have reached the ultimate conclusion of non-conceptuality being the only thing worthy to be a quote solution. Non-conceptuality is the closest thing.
Hello, I would like to thank my audience for watching this video until the very end. I would like to thank the YouTube channel Mark Antinatalist for uh, sharing my content upon his community page. Uh, because of him, I have grown my audience exponentially, and I would like to thank Mark Antinatalist from the bottom of my heart for promoting my content. I also promote his content as well. I will leave a link to one of his videos in the comments, and you can go and check him out. And I would also like to thank a YouTube channel by the name of Christopher Sedaris. I will also leave a link to one of his videos, and I really like his content as well. He also, Christopher Sedaris, shared one of my videos on his community page as of late, and I would like to thank you guys. My channel does grow by word of mouth, so if you like my content and you are a content creator yourself, uh, please, only if you feel that you resonate enough to be able to promote it, I would very much appreciate it. Uh, please share this video. Please help my channel grow. Um, if you would like to add me on Facebook and send me a personal message, you could do so at Fish Corbett. That is FishCorbett. And I would also like to say that this new type of improvisation that I've been doing on my most recent videos, um, it seems to be going more successfully than I had anticipated. Uh, my last two videos have received over 1,000 views and over 100 likes in less than 24 hours, which is unprecedented. Those are my last two videos are the most successful videos statistically that I've ever uploaded thus far, and I hope this video reaches the same admiration. So if you did like it, be sure to leave a thumbs up and uh, leave a comment, and I will make videos like this in the future as well, because you guys seem to be responding well to them, this sort of off-the-cuff style. And I definitely appreciate my audience. Thank you for watching my videos by the thousands every time I upload them. This is very heartwarming to me. I appreciate you guys with all sincerity. And until next time, I will catch you on the flip side, okay?